Good evening and welcome to our Center Hill Summer Series. So many things are in a state of upheaval, having to do things differently than we're accustomed to doing them, and that is also the case with our summer series. We have decided we want to go ahead with the summer series that we have planned here at Center Hill for the months of June, July, and August. And so we're going to do this, at least at the outset, by video. Hopefully we'll be able to transition back to live services on Wednesday evenings before we get to the end of this summer, but possible that won't be the case, and so we'll begin in this way. And as has been announced, the way we're going to approach this, our series for this summer has to do with the theme of mental health. And we have divided the subject up into three areas. And we're going to begin in the month of June with anxiety and depression. The way we're approaching this every month is the first two Wednesday nights of the month, we have an expert in the field, someone who is going to be able to speak to us from this area of expertise. But then the remainder of the month, we have asked gospel preachers to address this from the standpoint of Scripture. And so I think both approaches are going to be very helpful to us and are very necessary for us as we approach these. And so month of June, anxiety and depression. And with us for these first two Wednesday nights of June is Charles Jackson. Charles and his wife Diana have been married for 39 years. They have two grown children. Angie, who is the curator for a museum in the Arkansas Parks System, and Josh is a major in the National Guard and works full-time with the Veterans Administration. Charles received his Bachelor of Ministry from Harding University in 1999, as well as a Master's of Marriage and Family Therapy in 2001. He has worked locally with the Children's Homes, Life Strategies Counseling, and Mid-South Health Systems. In 2007, he was president of the Arkansas Mental Health Counselors Association and had a private practice in Paragould called A Place to Talk from 2004 to 2017. Charles is not a stranger to many in the congregation, and so we are glad to have him with us for these first two sessions. And so now we'll turn this over for the evening to Charles.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon. We're going to be talking about anxiety this afternoon, and the irony of it is, since I found out it's going to be taped, recorded, and then shown later, this has been a stressful event for me. Just getting ready for this, I don't mind talking in public. This is a different kind of public. So, anyway, thank you for your patience and thank you for participating. We are going to talk about stress this afternoon, and I kept an article from last year about what stresses out Americans, and I was expecting, as I started to read this, that it was going to be spiders and snakes and public speaking and things of that nature. Those things cause stress. I expected also being out in public. I'm a marriage and family therapist. I work with adults for the past 2.5 years specifically. And I hear a lot of, I'm anxious about going outdoors or going out in crowds and things like that. So that's what I was expecting in this article. The irony is, let's see, this is a Harris poll, August 1 to September 3, 2019. They polled 3,617 adults. The most prevalent cause of stress in the United States is the fear of mass shootings. More than 7 in 10 adults, 71% of Americans, say that mass shootings are a significant source of stress in their lives. Now, this survey was done pre-COVID, so perhaps the numbers have changed. But at that time, 71% of Americans were scared of mass shootings. 1/3 of Americans worried about it so much that they actually changed their behavior, and there were certain venues they would not visit. 1/3 of us are stressed over something that happens to this percentage of Americans in any given year, but it stresses 71% of us. Another 69% of Americans worry about and are stressed over medical care and can they afford it and will their insurance cover things. 3 out of 5, 60%, report that they are stressed and anxious about acts of terrorism, and that's a source of stress. 56% of Americans identify the upcoming presidential election as a significant stressor. Half of Americans, 56%, said that this, in their opinion, is the lowest point in our nation's history that they can remember. 56% worried about the condition of our nation. Climate crisis, 56% there report that this is a significant stressor. Sexual harassment, 39% worried about sexual harassment. Immigration, worried about 48%, cite immigration as a stressor. More than 75% of American adults report physical or emotional symptoms of stress, such as headache, feeling tired, or changes in sleeping habits. That's a lot of stress. It's a lot of things to worry about. I was going to say, for just a moment, let's look at what's called the DSM-5. That's the tool that therapists and psychologists, psychiatrists use to describe conditions amongst themselves. It's a way we give a diagnosis. There are criteria for, in this case, I'm going to look at the criteria for generalized anxiety disorder. I realize there are a lot of different kinds of stress in the way it plays out. There are seasonal affective disorders. There are phobias. There's generalized anxiety disorder, which we're going to look at as kind of like a blanket that we're putting over everything. There are people who are stressed with separation anxiety. But I'm going to put all of these things under one category just for the sake of this discussion. It keeps it from being too confusing. But the criteria for, and I do this at the risk of offering you symptoms. I'm not trying to give you symptoms that you can now go back to your doctor and say, oh, Charlie said I'm doing this, this, and this, therefore I have generalized anxiety disorder. It's not what I'm trying to do. I do want to show, though, well, let's talk about it as we go through. To qualify for the generalized anxiety disorder diagnoses, a person would have excessive worry over everyday concerns. They would find it difficult to control this worry. And they would have anxiety or worry associated with 3 or more of the following. So let's read through those. They would feel restless, feeling on edge, keyed up, unable to relax. This would lead to being easily fatigued, tired all the time. They would say they have difficulty concentrating, or they are irritable. They would find they have muscle tension, difficulty sleeping. Those are, to have 3 out of 5 of those may qualify you for generalized anxiety disorder. The next point, though, I think is probably the most important point of the entire list, and that is the disturbance causes clinically significant distress or impairment in social, occupational, or other important areas of functioning. To be diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder, these things that we just talked about would have to be so strong and so powerful that they're impairing your daily functioning. It's not just that I'm not going to the movies because I fear mass shootings. I'm not going out at all because I fear mass shootings. It has to be clinically significant distress or impairment to qualify for this diagnosis. The last 2, it's funny, I think, because most people do not want to talk about these 2. This is not the reason I have generalized anxiety disorder. Perhaps the symptoms might be better explained by a different mental disorder, in which case we'd have to acknowledge we have a mental disorder, or the disturbance is not attributable to physiological effects of substance abuse or some other medical condition. So those are the things that are considered the criteria for a diagnosis of generalized anxiety disorder. Be aware, for lack of a better way to say it. Everybody gets anxious. Everybody gets anxious. Jesus talked about, don't be anxious, and we'll get to that in a moment. If you were going to have a major test, if you were going to test for your driver's license, if you were going to go meet your future mother-in-law for the first time, and you did not feel stressed or anxious, I would think you were a sociopath and didn't feel anything at all. There are times to feel stress. times when your life is actually in danger, for instance, times when there are things going on beyond your control and you don't know what to do next and you're feeling overwhelmed. Stress is normal. But when it reaches the level of impairing social, occupational, or other areas of functioning, only then does it qualify for a diagnosis. Feeling stressed is a normal part of everyday life. In fact, let's go into some of the biology, and there won't be a test, so there don't need to be stressed at it. But I'd like to explain to you some of the things that happen about stressful situations. When you and I are sitting here conversing, talking, thinking, you're using the front part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex. It's the part where you process information, memories stored here on the sides. You're able to access these memories and pull them in and think about them. When things are normal, this is what's being used. If you get in an argument with your spouse, if you're in a near accident or an accident in a vehicle, if you are being chased by a grizzly bear, we'll talk about that in a moment, this part of your brain shuts down. The part of your brain called the amygdala, it's a small walnut-sized organ in the middle of your brain, between your ears and behind your nose. It's very, very deep back here. That's the part of your brain it's the emotional center. It's the feeling center of your brain. Let's use an example to talk about how these two parts work together. If you're walking through the woods and having a good time, enjoying the scenery, you're aware of what's going on, you can see the birds singing and things like that, and or hear the birds singing, and you hear a large branch break. And now you're not just walking in the woods, now you're concerned about something. There is something big. This isn't Bambi or Thumper. Something broke a large branch. You heard it crash. Now you're alert. You're aware of what's going on even more so. If you turn the corner and there's a grizzly bear and he's up on his hind legs and he's got his mouth open and he's roaring at you, the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that you think with, shuts off. It's not even present anymore. In fact, if we did a scan on it in a machine, which we wouldn't be able to do at that time, it wouldn't even show any activity. The amygdala immediately takes over because it's there to save your life. The amygdala dumps chemicals, or rather it causes various glands to dump chemicals into your body, cortisol, adrenaline, painkillers, endorphins, and it does all of this in a hurry, and you feel this rush because I've got to fight this bear. Or you feel this rush because I've got to run from this bear. Fight or flight, you've heard that before. That's what's happening when the amygdala takes over. There's a lot of things that occur in your body. Let's give you some examples. I'm not going to hit all of them, but just some examples. Respiration goes up. You breathe faster. Pulse rate goes up. That seems obvious. Blood pressure goes up. The blood flow from the extremities, fingers and feet, is constricted and blood starts coming into your internal organs in the anticipation of the grizzly bear causing you to leak, and this blood needs to be in your internal organs to keep you alive. All of this stuff happens in a flash. You don't have to think about it. The amygdala's got it. It's got it. It's under control. It also stops your digestion, hence the feeling that, oh, I've got this lead in my stomach. On the other hand, it often evacuates the bowels and the bladder. Soldiers in combat, about 20% of them evacuate their bowels and their bladder in the middle of combat. Nobody talks about it, but it's there. Because it's your brain taking over, your amygdala rather, taking over the functions of the body. It says, I don't need the ballast, and it dumps it. So they evacuate their bowels or their bladder. It's not, well, I guess it would be embarrassing. It's not the end of the world. It's just your body preparing for fight or flight. It is an autonomic nervous system response. You don't have to think about it. In fact, if you had to stand there and think about it, you'd probably die. If you were able, even if you were biologically capable of thinking, oh, is this Ursus horribilis, the American, or the cinnamon? I'm not thinking right now either. It is impossible for you to think, is this Ursus horribilis, the American grizzly bear? Or is this the cinnamon phase of the Alaskan brown bear? If you stood there and thought about it and tried to figure this out, you would be eaten. So God has prepared us to either fight or flee. You could either do what my grandfather did one time. He was faced with a grizzly bear in Alaska during World War II, walking along a trail. Grizzly bear came around the corner. I said, "Papa, what'd you do?" He said, "I reached down that bear's throat and I grabbed him by the tail and I jerked him inside out." You could do that. Or you could turn and run. Actually, it would probably be safer to try what my grandfather tried. But that's what all this stuff is happening very quickly. Now that's the physical stuff. There's some other physical things that happen too. For instance, as I'm looking at you now, my hands are out to my sides at about 180 degrees. And I can see my fingers wiggling just by looking ahead. In this fight or flight mode, your amygdala says, this stuff out here isn't important. There's the threat, and that's the only thing you see. And it will exclude to the point of you won't even remember those other things that happen out here. If it's in the dark, your vision shuts down, and your ears, it's like you're on radar. You can hear everything going on because your amygdala says, vision's not important right now, I need my ears to work as well as they can. All of these things happen, well, obviously much faster than it's taken me to describe them to you. That's the fight or flight response. So there we go. Now then, let's figure out a way to use this to our advantage. I was, a long time ago, as a friend of mine says, when I had a flat belly and dark hair, a police officer. I started that at 19 and a half. In Texas, you could do that then. Amazing to me that they would consider a 19 and a half even capable, but they did. But I was fortunate. I had a good field training officer. One of the things that Wayne taught me was the color codes. The government has since then they've adapted the color codes to apply to levels of threat in case of terrorist attacks. They put that in since 2001. I'm talking about 1979. But the color codes as I learned them were white, yellow, orange, and red. In condition white, this is where people walk around with their head in their armpits. They're not aware of what's going on. They wouldn't recognize a stressful situation if it whacked them upside the head. An example, someone standing at a bank. Somebody robs the bank. Gunfire goes off. Later, when there's an interview, the reporter's standing with his microphone. "Mister, what did you see?" And he sticks it out. And somebody says, "Well, I was standing in line at the bank and I just minded my own business. All of a sudden, I heard firecrackers." I don't think in recorded history have there been firecrackers going off at a bank. But there have definitely been times when people have fired guns in banks. Condition white, absolutely clueless, walking around, doesn't have any idea what's going on. Condition yellow, and these are color codes for situational awareness. Condition yellow is you're aware of what's going on. You look to scan the crowd, scan the situation, and you trust that your subconscious, if there is something amiss, something out of whack, you'll see it. Condition yellow is comfortable. It's at ease, at peace, but it's not condition white. It's aware of what's going on. For instance, you can walk into a restaurant, scan the crowd. You could worry about everybody in the crowd. Oh my goodness, what about that guy with his back to me? Don't bother. I'm suggesting that it is entirely reasonable to simply trust your subconscious that it will protect you. It will tell you where the anomalies are and what you need to watch for. If you are scanning the audience or scanning the crowd and that gets your attention, let's go with a case history. Somebody's wearing a trench coat, a dark hat, they've got their hands in their pockets, it's not cold or wet outside, and there are suspicious bulges in the fabric of their clothing. You're no longer on yellow. You're not scanning the entire room. You're not wondering what everybody else is doing. Now, that fellow has your attention. He's a risk. Does that mean you go over and whack him with a stick? No. It just means he's got your attention and you're seeking more information. This is equivalent to the branch breaking in the woods we were talking about earlier. Your body is going to start amping up in condition orange. It's going to prepare for fight or flight, but it's not a surprise. It's not something that happens instantaneously. It is preparation for. If he does do something suspicious, throws his coat open, there's a shotgun and he pulls it out, you're no longer in orange. I want to tell it to you as I was taught as a policeman. You're no longer observing and trying to figure out what's going on. Now you pull your firearm and now he has to decide whether he's going to get shot or not. Now that's an extreme example. But the point is, condition red is for extremes. It's for those times when you must fight or run. There are times when it is appropriate to run. The problem is 71% of the Americans live in condition orange all the time. If you're in orange and you're focused on one problem, you do not see the other 90% of the things going on around you. It's actually less prepared than someone who is at a lower level of alertness. Now, I didn't say no level, white. I said a lower level of alertness. I remember when I was first seeking to be a police officer. I was 18 years old. I was in college, a bunch of buddies of mine. We were all in college together. And I thought, that policeman, he's got to be on orange. And that's before I learned the color codes. I was thinking, I've got to be alert, ready to go, ready for any action, anytime, whatever goes on. I've got to be uptight and ready to go. I'm on it. A buddy of mine named Tim took advantage of this. He used to startle me. He'd walk up behind me and goose me, or we'd be walking along the sidewalk and he'd go, wah! And I'd jump, and he thought that was a lot of fun because I stayed so wrapped up all the time. And he thought it was funny. I finally got tired of that, and I figured out this is kind of stupid. I'm living in the wrong state here, because if I'm this amped up, I'm going to be worried about Tim all the time instead of watching what else is going on around me. So I arranged with a mutual friend. I said, Vance, I want you to talk to Tim, and I want you to tell Tim that the next time he startles me, I'm going to jump like I'm surprised and I'm going to punch his lights out. Now, I'm not suggesting that. I'm just stating what happened in the past, because I'm tired of being startled. And with that, Tim stopped startling me, and I could settle down into what we now know as condition yellow and be alert and aware of what's going on and trusting that my subconscious would protect me if something needed my undivided attention. These things are progressive. We're going to come back to them here in a moment. All of this stress, when I talked about being in condition orange or condition red, and all of the things that the amygdala does to your body, wears you out, uses you up. It uses up your concentration. If you stay in this condition very long, it actually affects your memory. And you'll start losing not just memory of the event, your memory will start failing. If you stay in this condition all the time, this condition orange or red that I'm talking about, it affects your heart, because your heart is always ready. It's always got all this endorphins and all this adrenaline going, and it's ready to just beat right out of your chest, is the way some people describe it. You're wearing your heart out. It won't last as long as it would have otherwise. Then it would contribute to what's called adrenal exhaustion. The adrenaline that's going through your body, if it's there all the time, like I said, it wears your body out. Hormonal pathways are disrupted. Your muscles won't burn fat as efficiently. You will actually gain fat. Your immune system will be affected. Your digestive system will be affected. Remember I said that it shuts off the digestion? All of these things because you're living in condition orange, not yellow. The stress will also lead to obesity. Maybe that's what I've been struggling with. I've just been too stressed out. Stress also leads to a weakened immune system. It's not good for you. Now here's the rub. Usually, it's a choice. Usually, and I say usually because there are some genetic factors, there are certainly environmental factors, but usually the alertness or the level of alertness that we're maintaining is a choice. But you would say, Charlie, that's stupid. I don't want to be stressed out like this. I don't want to be anxious all the time. I want to be able to go out in public, and I want to be comfortable. I want to be able to enjoy things out in public. I want to go shopping. I wouldn't choose to live this way. Now, I didn't say necessarily that you're choosing cognitively, but you're choosing. There are things that you can do that will improve your response, help move you to yellow from orange, help you to relax. One of the things that helps is breathing. Let's start there. You breathe approximately 25,000 times a day. My guess, you're like the rest of us, myself included, something that you don't think about. Turns out most of us are breathing in such a way that it's actually contributing to stress. There's a book recently put out by Nichols. It's called Breath. I listened to an interview about it recently. Breath was a journalist who started studying really the effects of breathing, and the whole book is about it. And while it doesn't sound like something the average person would read for a summer read, it's interesting enough. I'm going to get a copy as soon as I can. It's called Breath. One of the things that he's determined through his study and through exploring with experts, if you inhale and exhale at a 5.5 second rate, 5.5 seconds in, 5.5 seconds out, 5.5 seconds in, 5.5 seconds out. Breathing like that balances out your body, balances out your oxygen needs, balances you out, and allows you to relax. I want to try that for just a moment. I'll pick up my watch here. You do it with me, okay? What we're going to do is inhale for 5.5 seconds. I'll raise my finger up and show. And then we're going to exhale for 5.5 seconds. Now my watch doesn't show halves, so we'll do close what we can. Okay. On my mark, we're going to inhale. Oh, my lungs are already full. There's 5.5. Exhale slowly. It's going to be easier to exhale than it was to inhale. There's 5.5. Let's do it again. In. Exhale. One more time. In. Exhale. That seems like a very long breath. It's something that takes practice. It's not something that happens immediately. It is something that happens by choice. We can control the way our body is feeling literally by the way we breathe. That's a start. One of the things that Wayne taught me also a long time ago is in times of stress. Remember I said you cannot think, is it the Ursus horribilis, the American grizzly bear, or is it the cinnamon phase, the Alaskan brown bear? You cannot think clearly when you are anxious or stressed. You need to take all of these things that are back here that are going on and figure out a way to control them. But how do you control your pulse? How do you control your blood pressure, your digestion? I'd like for you to stop digesting your dinner. Difficult to do. But you can control your breathing. Wayne Terman taught me another breathing technique many years ago. He said, when you're stressed, inhale for a slow count of 4. Hold your lungs full for a slow count of 4. Exhale slowly through your mouth for a slow count of 4. And then hold your lungs empty for a slow count of 4. And repeat this cycle as many times as necessary. I remember one time we were going to serve a felony warrant. There were several of us standing in a hallway fixing to kick this door in and go serve a felony warrant. Our information was that the bad guy was inside and he was armed. I was carrying a shotgun, so were my fellow officers. And we were standing in this hallway preparing to do our job. My job in this particular circumstance was to get in the door and then turn to the left. Whatever's to the left was mine to take care of. Somebody else had the rest of the room. It was all we'd practiced this. That was my job. And I was sucking air. I thought, I'm getting ready. I'm oxygenating my body. I was peeling paint off the walls. Stuart, one of my partners, slugged me between the shoulder blades. He was standing just behind me and he said, Jackson, breathe. Well, I was breathing. Everybody in the hall could hear me. What he meant was inhale for a slow count of 4. Hold your lungs full for a slow count of 4. Exhale slowly through your mouth for a slow count of 4. And then hold your lungs empty for a slow count of 4. And then repeat the cycle. I did that a couple of times. You and I'll do it together in a moment. I did that a couple of times, got my breathing under control. What's happening is control is shifting from the amygdala back to the prefrontal cortex. They didn't need a big old grizzly bear in there who's not able to think clearly. My partners needed somebody who's aware, alert, knows what's going on, and can think clearly enough to deal with it. Let's try that. In fact, you'll find the autogenic breathing, the count of 4 is the way I learned to call it, what I learned to call it. You'll find that's a little bit easier than trying to inhale, exhale for 5.5 seconds. So let's do it together. Inhale through your nose. Hold it. Exhale slowly through your mouth. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold your lungs empty. Inhale through your nose. Hold it. Exhale slowly through your mouth. And hold it again. It's called autogenic breathing. What it does is move control from here. Because if I ask you to control your pulse, you would find it impossible. If I ask you to control your blood pressure, you'd find it impossible. Control your digestion, etc. Impossible with the amygdala. But with this, forcing control of your breathing, it allows this to let go, and then you really are controlling your pulse and your blood pressure and your digestion because you're able to relax, think more clearly, and to deal with the situation at hand. Something else that helps is called exposure. Exposure is where you know what the stressor is. Let's say going to shop Walmart. A lot of my clients say that. Can't handle crowds. If I can get the client to be willing to go to Walmart for 2 minutes, I don't even want them to shop for anything. I encourage them, if you would, I want you to go in one door, walk across the front of the store, and then come out the other door. The odds are pretty good. Nobody's going to hurt you in that amount of time. It's exposure to a stressful situation. Each time you do that, it reinforces, oh, I can handle this. I'm good to go. I can take care of myself. I can do Walmart. I can go grocery shopping. I can manage. It's exposure. And then the next time, instead of staying in 30 seconds, I'd like for you to stay a minute, maybe 2, maybe 5. Would you be willing to give up your safety signals, the things that you used to use to reinforce actually the negative, reinforce the anxiety? The safety signals, for instance, might be, I have my husband here with me or my wife here with me. As long as she's standing here beside me, I think I can handle this. I want to know where the bathrooms are. I want to know where the exits are. I want to keep control. Are you willing to give those up for a little while? And then for a little while longer? And then for a little while longer? This is one of the ways that we overcome anxiety. Exposure. Another is breathing. The breathing can also be called arousal management, but we didn't really get into that. Here's an important item to reduce stress, to reduce anxiety. Okay, you're not going to like this, but I'm going to go ahead and say it. Turn off the news. Quit watching the media. Did you observe, as we talked about the very first thing when we were starting, we talked about all these items that people are afraid of, stressed over, anxious about: mass shootings, the economy, immigration. All of these things, it's what the news is reporting on. Now, am I saying go around the world completely clueless? No, because that's white. I'm saying we don't need hours and hours and hours of news. A study indicates cortisol is one of the stress hormones. It's one of the things that you can measure and say how stressed somebody is. It's measured in the spit. That's why I keep pointing up here. It's measured in the spit. If someone is at a major stressful event, let's say, for instance, 9/11, everybody remembers that. If they were in New York City on the day that the Twin Towers fell, they would be very stressed, and their body would produce a certain amount of cortisol. It turns out that if someone has watched 4 hours of news coverage of that event, their body produces more cortisol than the person who was there. Turn off the news. We've talked about exposure. Here's one. It's a church word. We very often say, give it to God. Now, I believe in prayer. I've been a Christian since I was 12. Believe me, I have offered many prayers. How do you give it to God, though? How do you really say, I've got a problem, I'm going to give it to God? I would like to suggest, and you've heard people say, I gave it to God, but I kept taking it back. I kept taking it back. Explain this to me. Tell me, how do you do this? I don't understand. Let's look at it very practically for a minute. Usually, when there's a stressful event, somebody's in the hospital, we pray to God and we tell God what outcome we're expecting. And then we keep waiting for the outcome. This is what I want. This is what I'm needing. This is what I expect. That's very stressful. And then you keep going back to God and saying, God, remember, mom's in the hospital, or my mother's, whatever, my mom's in the hospital, let's leave it at that one. And I want you to make her better. Well, she's not getting better. She might not get better. Certainly not on the time frame I want. Let's assume the best, that she does. Again, it would not be on the time. I want her better now. I want her to come home tonight. Wouldn't it be better if we could find a way, and here's what I'm proposing, to separate the problem from the solution? God, my mother's in the hospital. Here's what I want you to do with it. Moses tried that. God approached Moses at the burning bush and said, I want you to do a job. And Moses said, I can't. Here's this, because I can't speak. I'm no good. I'm embarrassed. I'm ashamed. Take God off. How much different is that, however, from Jesus' prayer in Gethsemane? This cup's coming. Can you take it away? And then he concluded, not my will, but yours. I would like to suggest if we could take the problem and give it to God. It's okay to bring it to his attention. Not only does he expect it, he wants it. Bring the problem to God. And then the prayer should be, and Father, give me the wisdom and the patience and the courage to accept your solution. This is when we feel peace. This is what Paul is talking, or what Jesus says. Just a second. Philippians 4:6. Paul is speaking. He says, "Do not be anxious about anything. Instead, in every situation, through prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, tell your requests to God. And the peace of God that surpasses all understanding will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus." The practical application of that is separate the problem that I'm praying about, that I'm bringing to God. I'm thankful to him that he listens, that he takes the problem, and that I know that he's going to, and then I accept the answer. Then I can find peace. Because I don't have to try to tell God how to solve it. He will. He's got it. Last time I heard, he's got really broad shoulders, and he can carry it. Jesus was talking in Matthew chapter 6 on the Sermon on the Mount. Because of the time, I'm going to skip. It starts in verse, no, I'm not. Jesus is talking. Let's listen to what he says. "Therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Isn't there more to life than food, and more to the body than clothing? Look at the birds in the sky. Do they not sow or reap or gather into barns? Yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Aren't you more valuable than they are? And which of you, by worrying, can add even 1 hour to his life? Why do you worry about clothing? Think about how the flowers of the field grow. They do not work or spin. Yet I tell you that not even Solomon in all his glory was clothed like one of these. And if this is how God clothes the wild grass, which is here today and tomorrow is tossed into the fire to heat the oven, won't he clothe you even more, you people of little faith? So then, don't worry, saying, what will we eat, or what will we drink, or what will we wear? For the unconverted pursue these things, and your heavenly Father knows you need them. But above all," here's the key, condition yellow, "pursue his kingdom and righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. So then, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Today has enough trouble of its own." Those are Jesus' words. And it might be easy to say, give it to God, and not have any idea about how to do that. I'd like to suggest, like I said a moment ago, separate the problem from the solution. Give the problem to God, and then pray for the wisdom to accept His solution. That's the only way to find peace. I mentioned a moment ago about watching the news, and stop that. Very frequently, my mother-in-law, who watches the news quite often, will tell me about she simply cannot understand. It just doesn't make sense. And then she'll tell me about today's news. And it just doesn't make sense. Why will people, I can't understand. And I say, stop that. I'm not being hateful. But she's trying to make two things that are incompatible, evidently. Why can't people just make sense? And what's going on? I can't make these things making sense. Stop trying. Except that there will always be wars and rumors of wars. That's what Jesus said. There will always be wars and rumors of wars. Quit trying to make sense of it. Quit trying to think that because you know all of this that's going on, you're going to have an influence on the outcome. Stop that. Turns out the news goes on without you, whether you know it or not. If it is really important, you'll find out about it. You'll hear. Finally, brothers and sisters, no, I don't want to, I'm going to save that for last. I want to touch on medications. Be aware there are many, many medications out there right now, mostly benzodiazepines, that are used to treat anxiety disorders. Benzodiazepines are virtually immediately effective. Within 20-25 minutes, you will feel the effects of them. 30 to 60% of the people who are put on benzodiazepines, Xanax, Klonopin, Clonidine, etc., it doesn't work. It doesn't fix the problem. In fact, these medications, the entire benzo family, have as a side effect anxiety, the very thing they're trying to cure. If you've never had a benzo your entire life and you're feeling anxious, and this is what anxiety feels like, and you take a benzo, it'll calm you out. Without any tolerances, without any withdrawals, when that first pill wears out, you start feeling anxious. So people assume, oh, I'm back up here, I'm anxious again, right here, and they take another. And it calms them down. And then they start feeling anxious. And that's why doctors keep upping the dose until they're getting 4 pills a day, because I feel anxious, I feel anxious. There are times when you should feel anxious. And if you take a pill to solve the problem, I would suggest it's probably not solving the problem. If you take a pill and believe it's solving the problem, all it's done is calm you down. The problem's still there. If mom's in the hospital, you're taking a pill is not going to get her out of the hospital. If the bills are due and you've been laid off because of the quarantine and you don't know what you're going to do next, and you take a pill, or you drink, or you use some substance other than a prescription, when the effects have worn off, you're still there. And the problem is still there. And you're still feeling anxious. I'm a therapist. I confess a bias. I would rather people try almost anything else other than the medications. There are times when they help, when it is clinically indicated, and I point down here because I put my notes on the floor. When it's clinically indicated and it is interrupting your life, medications may help. But even then, they're a crutch. Hopefully, to help you get your feet back under you and start dealing with life again. Okay, I mentioned a moment ago about stop watching the news. This is where we're going to end. Philippians 4:8. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is worthy of respect, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if something is excellent or praiseworthy, think about these things. And what you learned and received and heard and saw in me, do these things, and the God of peace will be with you. And you may respond, well, that's just too easy. That makes it sound too simple. I didn't say it was easy, but it is simple. God bless you. Be at peace.